Welcome to Something for the Turbo, the new weekly podcast brought to you by Unfound, the global platform for the travel-loving cyclist.
Welcome to another episode of Something for the Turbo. We hope you're all having a good week. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, tell your cycling friends, and spread the word. And if you haven't discovered it yet, please go and check out the Unfound app, available both on the App Store and in Google Play. And register. You can register and join the global community of cyclists. It's a place where you can share rides and photos and articles and general cycling content with other cyclists from around the world. So get yourself on there today and spread the word. And let me bring you today's guest, who is a former British U23 road race champion, the current British hill climbing champion. He is a YouTube superstar. It's Mr. Ed Laverack. Ed, thank you very much for joining us. How are you getting on?
I'm good, Julian. Thank you much for having me on here.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you're pretty busy with YouTube and training, of course. How's it been the last few months with lockdown? Obviously quite a disruption for you, given you had big ambitions this year. What races have you lost thus far, and how are you sort of keeping motivated and focused?
Yeah, well, there was the British road calendar that was kind of my main focus, and then when that was kind of pulled away from under my feet, so to speak, I was kind of left in the dark a little bit, just like lots of others, I guess. But you know, with YouTube, with the stuff I was doing, I was already live streaming Zwift races quite regularly up until lockdown kicked in the UK, but I just saw it as an opportunity to live stream every day. I mean, that's what I would be doing anyway. I'd be Zwift racing or at least training indoors on Zwift. So that's what I did for the best part of 11 weeks when the UK went into official lockdown.
And in terms of, did you have to refocus your training, or I mean, do we know, are you going to be able to defend your British hill climbing? Have we had a confirmation on that yet?
It's still very much up in the air. There's a lot of races that are, I mean, you can plan for them, but until there's anything, you know, the government give you the absolute all clear to do something, then, or even the sport, you know, like Welsh cycling, British cycling, Scottish cycling, you know, they have to give, I guess, the correct guidance. And for the time being, there's some positive waves being made. I mean, the time trials are starting again.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
And, you know, hill climbing in a way is taking up less road. But what you do get with hill climbing in the UK, at least, is a lot of people stood on the side of the road, which I think, you know, kind of, I don't think that's going to be able to happen, at least possibly until maybe the end of the hill climbing season. But then do the nationals happen? I'm hoping they don't.
You're hoping they don't?
I'm hoping they don't, because it'll be a hard time for me to defend my national title on such a short hill this year.
But also to do a hill climb with no spectators as well. I mean, that's going to be pretty soul destroying.
Yeah, it's just like doing a Strava segment, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, crazy. So let's go back a little bit, because I forgot to mention, happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you.
Did you have a good day?
Yeah, I did, actually. There was actually no bike riding involved. There was lots of cake. Well, in fact, I had cake for breakfast, so I suppose that you can't top that, really.
No, you can't top that. Yeah, I was just going to say, given your relatively young years, you seem to have been around the UK scene for a very long time. When did you get into riding a bike, and you sort of turned pro at 18, was it? Talk us through the early days.
Yeah, I was a member of British Cycling Club from the age of around 15, 16. And long story short, I raced a couple of crits and time trials as part of the club, and I made quite a rapid rise to, I guess, the competitive side of cycling. As a junior, which is between the ages of 16 to 18, I didn't really have any other goal or ambition apart from to win the Junior Tour of Wales, which at the time was some of the biggest, of the biggest best one day bike riders have won that bike race. You know, Geraint Thomas has won it, and I was just kind of solely focused on that. And in 2012, 2011, the transition I put myself through then. I trained, some would say I trained like too much as a final year as a junior, but I saw it as the only way I could, I guess, because I came into the sport late as a 15, 16-year-old. I almost saw it as that I had to catch up.
Okay, you had to get that basic.
Yeah, with the other juniors that have been riding since they were, 8 or 7 or even younger. So, I put in a good performance. and I came out third overall. I think I did a pretty much, apart from one stage, there was 5 stages, and one stage there was a prologue as well. One stage ended in a sprint finish, in a bunch finish, and that was the only stage that I didn't finish outside the top 10 for. So I was pretty consistent every stage, and then after that, I think like there was a period of maybe 2 months where it's kind of the end of the season and things time to wind down. This was late August, the Junior Tour Wales, and I never kind of went out of my way to look teams. I was still relatively new to the sport, so I didn't really know what I should be doing. And even though I was kind of under the guidance of Welsh Cycling at the time, I never reached out to any teams. I wasn't really proactive in that sense. But funny enough, one rider was leaving Rafa Kondo, well, it was then to be Rafa Kondo GLT, that winter, and he was going back to university, and a spot became available in the team.
Okay.
And John Herity, who was manager of Rafa Kondo then, he approached Welsh Cycling to inquire about me because he actually signed Hugh Carthy, Will Stevenson, and then myself. So the top 3 who finished on the podium that year in that race, he went on to sign. And obviously Hugh Carthy has gone on to amazing things to ride at World Tour. And yeah, that's kind of like my foothold into the world of competitive cycling.
And you say you started cycling sort of 15. Did you have an athletic background as a kid growing up, or did you play much sport, or what was your sort of...
Typically, I played football. It was my growing up around here in South West Wales. You have Swansea City, you have, good facilities for, well, rugby or football really. But I never wanted to play rugby, but I always wanted to play football to a very high level. And I managed to get into the town academy, so Llanelli Academy, and worked my way up the ranks to play for the under-15s, and then I didn't make the cut, so I took a step back and I went back to play for my village, or I guess my small club. And it was there that I began to kind of reassess and think, was that like the moment where if they weren't going to take me on and that wasn't meant to be, then would I have to find a different sport? And ironically, the Olympics are on around about the same time. And this was in 2008. And I remember thinking, which sport looks the most appealing? Which sport looked the most kind of fascinating and cool? And it was a Sunday morning. I watched Nicole Cook win the women's Olympic road race.
Amazing.
Which, I think sometimes, we look at a lot of sporting icons, and usually, males usually look up to male sporting icons, and females the same. And it just so happened that it was Nicole Cook. It wasn't the men's road race that I was watching; it was the women's road race, and it was horrendous conditions. It was raining. There was very little left of the bike race at that point, and yeah, that just looked insane to me. And ever since then, the sport has still amazed me in the sense that there's the hill climbing, there's cyclocross, there's track, there's so many different things in the umbrella of cycling. There's ultra endurance. It's not even mainstream, although it is now becoming mainstream, the ultra endurance side of it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many facets to it, and you can keep discovering it. And there's really something for everyone as well. So once it captures your imagination, you're kind of hooked then, aren't you? Game over.
Yeah, it's a giant money pit.
Oh god, is that? You had 6 years with Rafa, right? JLT. It was 6 years, and raced all over the world with them, and had some good times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was one of the longest standing riders to be there. In one kind of in one stint, in one go. Lots of riders kind of came and went, and then came back again. Russ Downing, Graham Briggs, these riders who, and of course, Christian House, who, they kind of, national champion, stayed there for a long time, for a long stint in his career. So I was very grateful to be on the team for that length of time, but I didn't feel like I came into my own until the last 2 years of its existence. I was very much on a massive learning curve for those first 4 years.
Yeah. And do you feel, obviously, watching your YouTube channel, you obviously have quite an analytical approach to your riding and racing. Is that what you were picking up in those first 4 years, figuring out a system that works for you best as an athlete?
Yes, I jumped between coaches. I think it was around three coaches. So I probably went through more coaches than a Premier League team goes through managers. But I think it was just because of my lack of depth in stamina. My knowledge of the sport was very small. Truth be told, when I joined Rafa, I didn't even know who John Herity was. I didn't know of his history. I didn't know, of his pedigree. I didn't know any of the riders on the team. I never watched the Tour series, which for people listening who don't know, it's probably one of the biggest criterion-based race series in the world, based in the UK. And we kind of dominated it for a long period of time. And the first 4 years were very difficult. Like, we spent stints in Australia. We used to go to Australia and do training camps from Boxing Day until the middle of February. So it was a big stint out there. Do a couple of races. And, I'd get my head kicked in Australia purely on the heat, and I'd never had any experience racing. I'd never been abroad. Up until I went to Australia with the team at the time. So I'd never experienced heat like that, not even in the UK. So it was a massive learning curve in many ways. And I think my ability as a bike rider was very small at that time, even though I'd managed to kind of get myself on the team and get myself there. Lots of them could tell that I was still carrying puppy fat. I was still 64, 65 kilos, which, when I look back on pictures then, I can tell that I'm not, fully developed. And I kind of took almost until I was 23, until I had kind of formed into something that looked a little bit more like a racing cyclist and a hill climber than I did when I was 18 to 20. And I think, I didn't even for a minute back then think that I was, overweight or out of shape for my height. I'm 177 centimeters, 6 foot, give or take. And, I was 64 kilos, which is, that's not out of shape by any means. But over the years, it's just developed into, natural development, and you find your ideal body shape. And through all the riding, your body finds that natural kind of balance.
You figure out what works for you, yeah. And obviously you mentioned you think there's a bit of that was puppy fat, but also do you think that was figuring out from a nutrition perspective what worked for you individually personally as well?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit, but I definitely didn't pay any attention to my nutrition.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
I've been in the 7 years that I was in, 6 or 7 years I was in the sport to the elite level in the UK. I would probably hedge my bets that the majority of the peloton don't take their nutrition as seriously as they possibly could.
Wow.
There's a lot of riders that would probably, I'm not going to say they benefit from having better nutrition, because some riders swear on, I'll have a bar of chocolate the night before a race and that helps me go better. There's a lot of kind of tradition in, feed the body kind of, what you want to feed it and it'll fly the next day. It is almost like a lucky charm sort of thing. Whereas, I know some riders, and, no surprise that they're the experienced ones that are, very, very basic and clean. And yes, they allow themselves the treats and things, but they understand the importance of the nutrition then, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was a more recent thing for you. And are there still sort of nutritional dogmas that are floating around sort of pro cycling, myths about eating X, Y, and Z will do whatever, or is there more and more science creeping into the consciousness for everyone now?
I think there is more and more creeping in. I mean, it's in your face every day almost with technology on your phones, even watching YouTube videos. But I think, you see the trends of today with, vegan, riders going vegan, and they gain 5% of their performance, things like this. And, it does make you sit back and think then, I wonder if I could be trialing something in the off season, because traditionally, that's the other thing as well. Traditionally, the off season, which tends to fall in, October, November, riders are, they will take that month off and they will eat whatever they want to eat. And, funny enough, a lot of riders in the UK did that when lockdown was announced and they knew that no racing was going to happen for the next, X amount of months. But really, I think my personal perspective on that is, if you've got sponsors who sponsor a team and they want the most out of those riders, they want those riders to be prepared all of the time. Like if a race was to pop up on the calendar in a month's time and they say, we want the team to go and race that race, and the team goes around and says, right, rider A, we want you to go and ride that race, and rider A goes, I'm 5 kilos out of shape, then they'll be saying, well, why are you 5 kilos out of shape when you should be? This is the time where you could be like really going for the gains.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, you owe it to the people who, there are people who love the British cycling scene. They follow cycling. It's a little bit different to following the Tour de France and having, like looking out for those riders. But there are people who are big fans of, they're big fans of me on the hill climbing scene, and they're big fans of, the riders who race the road races in the UK. And I think you owe it to a certain extent to them to perform and to give them a good show and to be at the top of your game, like as much as you can for your whole career.
Yeah.
And the off season is just I don't think it's a thing anymore. I think, with cyclocross, with Zwift racing, with, anything now, I think the advances in training and everything, and nutrition as well, I think riders are just recovering faster. They're able to train more efficiently, and the off season I don't think is needed. I think you could see riders now trialing, going vegan for a month rather than just eating McDonald's for a month, or
getting on the. Yeah, I think just in general, just in terms of all sports as well, I think there's probably a realization that actually it makes your life easier if you keep yourself in good nick in the off season.
Yeah, I think it's not healthy to be swinging back and forth.
Of course, yeah. So talk us through what happened when JLT folded. Obviously, that was a difficult time for you. Did you know it was coming? How was that communicated?
Well, I was in a slightly different situation to everybody else, because the June that the team folded in September. In June, we went to the Tour de Beauce in Canada and near Quebec, and we raced quite a renowned stage race there, and I had a big crash on, I think it was stage 3. I can't really remember much from it, but I left half of my skin in Canada, I know that. But we were having doubts about the sponsorship and where the team was going to go as of the following year, because it's around that time of year in the summertime where, riders sign new contracts, and obviously teams to a certain extent, when they're looking for sponsors, it's the same kind of timing, although they do try to be proactive nearly all the time looking at sponsors and sponsorship. So when I crashed and I flew home, I was kind of out of the loop for maybe 2 and a bit months while I recovered. And I think when I started coming back, it was being talked about amongst the riders and the staff, but only the ones at the races. And I never really, it's that kind of bubble. If you're out of the bubble, you don't really get the idea and the feeling and the atmosphere as well. Because when they rocked up to the Tour of Britain, which, that year I was actually focused more on the Tour of Britain and actually getting a spot on the team for the Tour of Britain, because it was starting in my hometown.
Of course, yeah.
And the downside, like when I showed up to the hotel, because I was going to take them for a pre-race ride the day before, which is something that like I'll never forget, because we exited the hotel and maybe like 200 meters later we jumped on the cycle path and we rode for an hour and a half on the cycle path network around here, which is like up and down the coast. And the Comanche Council have done a really good job on on making like miles and miles of coastal path accessible for everybody here. So when I took, funny enough, Alex Dosett came out with us on that ride. And he couldn't believe, speaking from his experience, he couldn't believe that there was such a place in the UK with, a coastal path and like a forest cycle path, all tarmac.
Amazing.
And there was just a cafe at the end of it. So we didn't even have to get on the road to go to the cafe. So it was perfect. And I found out then in the team bus when I took them back, and John sat us all down, and he told us then that Tour of Britain would be the last race that the team would do.
Wow, I mean, where does your head even go when you hear that before a race?
Yeah, well, luckily I wasn't racing, but the boys had a pretty tough time that week. Being a part of the WhatsApp group, you could tell just by the messages that, motivation was low. They still performed, a couple of the boys still performed and they did great rides, but it is hard. But some of them, I think, knew it was coming because they were in that bubble, and they weren't told, but they could get the feeling and the sense. And
yeah.
Especially if you're proactive as well, going to other teams and the middle of the year, and you start talking to them, and they go, "Oh, have you heard that your own team is in trouble?" And sometimes that could be secondhand information, and you wouldn't even know coming from your own team. I'm not saying that happened because I didn't have a clue. I was at home resting up, but I felt like, well, exactly that. Like I didn't have another team. I didn't have a plan B. So when the new team of Swift Carbon came around, I knew one of the riders. I think this is where it comes down to connections again. It really, really helps if you have connections. I knew one of the riders on the team, and I asked him, could you forward me a phone number for the manager? And I got in touch, and then we signed not long after. But it was very scrappy. I didn't like. I'm the type of person that doesn't like leaving it to the last minute, or things aren't planned, or something crops up that you haven't factored in, and that was like a real shock to the system and a bit of a wake-up call as well.
That's crazy. I mean, it's the more I've spoken to a number of people in the last couple of months, and as an outsider, the more you hear about the internal ramblings of the sport, makes you realize how dysfunctional in some regards it is, and how tough it is as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is difficult. But so last year though, it was a good year for yourself.
Yeah, it was a good year. I mean, I raced the Tour of Britain, and I say I raced it. It was a tour of the UK that I enjoyed on my bike. Racing those races is completely different to what I expected it to be. I've raced the Tour of Yorkshire. And, I kind of had a sense of how it goes down, but that's only a couple of days. The Tour of Britain is obviously a week long, and it's a funny one because, you have, there was a quote, I can't remember it, so I'm not going to recite it, I'll bodge it. So there was a quote that I heard, something along the lines of, the Tour of Britain is where, you get, say, a third of the peloton come there on form, and they're chomping at the bit because they've hardly raced all year, and then you get another third of the peloton that are they're there to support other riders, and they're a bit tired from the year, and then you get the other third of the peloton who are on a holiday and they can't be bothered to be there. So that's roughly the quote I heard, and that was in the peloton itself. It wasn't around the dinner table. It wasn't one of those chats.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see, how that played out. It's very strange, the dynamics of, you have strong teams controlling the race, and when they want to go, they will go. When they want to light the race up, it's showtime, and there's no hanging about. But in the same breath, the hardest stages for me were actually the ones with the sprint finishes. It was like an unbelievable, just how fast they would come into a finish. I'm not talking the last 5K. I'm talking the last 40K.
40K. Yeah.
You're for someone like myself, 60 kilos soaking wet, and even if I'm sat in the right place in the bunch, I'm still, pressing the pedals the whole time just to stay in the group.
Wow.
And, I actually got dropped on the run into the Newcastle stage because I was in the wrong place. And there was, in the final, I think the final 8 kilometers, there was lots and lots of roundabouts. I remember that. There was lots of road furniture. And, we were doing 50k an hour, rattling along. And I just didn't feel confident in the people in front of me. And I was also struggling. I was kind of in the wind a little bit, and I wasn't able to hold myself there. But there's people like James Shaw who, he's only a couple of kilos heavier than me, but he's another level again. So, he's able to ride, a lot different to me in that sense. So he was able to look after himself a lot better than I was. And it wasn't his first tour Britain either. But then the Kendall stage, which was the hilliest stage, was actually the easiest stage for me, and that's, I guess that's obvious because it was so hilly that I was able to ride within myself on the climbs, whereas a lot of people were, kind of, 70 odd kilos, and they were having to ride a lot harder. But it was eye opening in that regard. It was like they're so strong on the flat, and once they get their speed going, there's no stopping them. But then, when we go up climbs, and granted, there wasn't like world class climbers in the field, then, it was like it was honestly like a different race, going up the climbs. It was like, it was like doing a different race.
So that was good. It must have been an awesome experience, sort of rubbing shoulders with some of those riders. And despite the sort of sketchy run-ins, full gas to the sprint stages in Newcastle, it must have been a brilliant experience.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
Every race has, some part to play in your career, whether that be a racing career or, just wherever the bike takes you.
Yeah, that's true. There's always learning something everywhere along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your British Hill Climbing Championship last year as well. Talk us through the numbers. I mean, was it 7.25 watts per kilogram for 5.5 kilometers? Is that right?
Yeah, that's what happens when you train for something really specific,
Yeah.
I think it's taken it. I remember, being sent messages by people saying, that's world tour numbers, and that's, and I've not blocked that out now, but, I understand where they're coming from, but I also reply to them with one word, and that's perspective. Like, you could do that dead fresh off a standing start. You could have trained like I did. I trained for it for like 6 weeks, and that was like the best I could have gone physically. Like equipment wise, I probably could have gone faster. I'm not talking a minute faster. I'm talking maybe 10, 15 seconds faster. But in terms of training and preparation, like that's what happens when everything, in my opinion, went right. And that's, that was I would like to think if the climb was a little bit longer, I could have held on to 7 watts per kilo for 20 minutes, which some people have told me is not possible. But it begs the question. It begs the question.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, look, I think you've been incredibly modest. I think they're sensational numbers. It's interesting. I mentioned to a few people that you were kindly coming on to join and had a lot of questions around equipment. So we'll come on to that in a minute. But talk us through that 6-week training block, looking at targeting this race. What did it look like, and how did you prepare yourself for it?
Well, the first thing I did was I actually sat down and I marked that day on the calendar. And for me, when I've actually learned about myself the last couple of years, and that's if I put something down and I say, right, I'm going to work towards that, then I'm very good at working towards that one thing, that one goal, and kind of reverse engineering it. So what's it going to take to not necessarily win, but beat the favourite? And, the hill climb season in the UK is very much, I guess, it's no secret. A lot of people are on Strava. You can look at, guys who are in the top 5 on the early season hill climb event in September, and you can see, okay, so this guy is doing, 6.7 watts per kilo for 12 minutes. This guy was coming second, has gone 10 seconds slower. So, you start kind of doing the sums, doing the maths. And for me, I didn't have like a power target until a week before that event. So the training was all about kind of how much time can I spend over threshold. And it was in a way, I never set myself the limitation then of, I want to hold 430 watts for, 11 and a half minutes. It was more a case of how much time can I accumulate in training at 430 to 480 watts. And then my theory was that if I was able to do, say, the 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, the micro intervals that we start to see trending quite a lot now. And the on periods wouldn't be flat out, but they would be, kind of 450 to 480 watts. So I would be able to do chunks of those for, 20 minutes at a time. And the idea would be that I'd spend probably a maximum of 20 minutes a session at 450 plus watts. And
wow.
So my idea would be then, if I was able to do that in a session, would I be able to clump that together to ride for 12 minutes at the same power without any kind of, over and unders? Saying that though, I guess this is what's fascinating with that climb that I won the national championships on, was that it did have a flat section. It actually had a 45 second flat section with about 1.5 kilometers to go, or just under a kilometer to go maybe. And that's where I actually recovered. I did the least amount of power the whole climb up there. And it was a tailwind, so I was able to recover and give more on the last steep section to the finish, where momentum obviously played its biggest part. But that was the training, the nutrition. It was kind of, for me, I've been playing about with it for a couple of years now, and that's kind of why I've got down to this kind of sweet spot of 58 to 60, 60, 61 kilos. When you get down to, a degree of leanness, I guess, your weight actually fluctuates quite a lot, because you might drink more one day than the next, or you might eat slightly more carbs than the next, or there's variations that will happen naturally.
Of course. Yeah.
So it's only as I got close to the event that I started to kind of manipulate the food more, where I'd only eat the carbs around the session, and the sessions wouldn't be. I would try not to burn more than 2,000 kilojoules per session, and there was about probably 5 rides a week that were around about 2,000 kilojoules burned. And the reason being that I didn't want to burn too many, because that put me in too much of a deficit, and then I'd have to eat more. And inflammation is inflammation. So if you eat, this is a very basic way of looking at it, but if you put your body through a hard training session, then that's going to cause inflammation, and then your body might react by putting on a little bit of weight or preserving things. But then if you do burn too much and you try to eat a lot then to compensate and to create that balance, then that's also going to cause inflammation, because you're putting so much food in that your body's then going, okay, I'm going to have to fight this now. I'm not fight it, but there's more things to deal with. So the more balance I can create and the less inflammation I can create, then that's what I'm going to shoot for. So it was a very
real delicate balancing act, right?
It is a very, very big balancing act.
And obviously I want to come onto your YouTube channel in a little bit, if that's okay. But just for anyone listening, if you haven't yet, do check out Ed's YouTube channel. We will put the details in the show notes. It's super interesting, informative, and it's very entertaining as well. So we're big fans. With regard to that specific hill, obviously I've watched the film. Did you train specifically with that flat section in mind, and how you deal with that?
Well, I didn't do any race because there were so many races in the build up to this particular hill climb. I used other hill climbs, actual races to simulate. So the actual week before that hill climb, there was a hill climb in Bristol, and it was let me try and get this right now. It was a 6.5 minute climb, I think. And I took around 30 seconds, if I can recollect, off the course record that day. The wind was favourable, but I did 7.3 watts per kilo for 6.5 minutes, which wasn't a personal best power for 6.5 minutes, but I rode it because it wasn't one continuous gradient. It had different pitches. It had a steep section near the top, and then the final half a kilometer was actually like pretty much a flat road.
Okay.
So I invested a lot of energy early on where it was steep, And then
Yes.
I mean, to give you numbers, the steeper sections I was probably doing 500 watts, and then the flatter sections I was almost going down to 380. There was a big difference, and that was actually the fastest. So I'm gonna plug the software, but I don't get anything for plugging this. But Best Bike Split allowed me to break down the climb and to see where to invest the most amount of energy on my pacing strategy. So I put in what power I thought I could hold.
Yeah.
I never thought that, fast forward a week, that I would be able to hold the same power on that climb, but for twice the time.
Twice the time. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't even twice the distance. It was twice the time. So it was pretty much 12. It was a 12-minute effort on Haytor. And that climb was 6 minutes 20, I think it was. So that's what was, to me, I couldn't have gone harder though on that climb in that. Like, although it was close to a power PB, I couldn't have gone harder because I wasn't training for a climb that short. To me, a 6-minute climb is still short. To me, 11-minute climb is still short. Because if you think about it, it's over before, even a 10-mile time trial is over before you think about it sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. Mad numbers. It's hard to fathom as a mere mortal. So obviously you won that, and you got some really good publicity off the back of that. And that's obviously because of the YouTube channel as well, do you think, and the name that you sort of making for yourself on the social media side as well? Do you think you got a lot of headlines?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of that. Funny enough, my parents said to me maybe 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, because 2 or 3 weeks after that win, I was getting people contacting me to do, interviews like this and like magazines and, also sponsorship as well, particularly for hill climbing. And my parents said to me, "You're actually getting more publicity for this than you did when you won the under-23 British Road Race Championships." And that was in 2014, and I was only just outside the top 10 in the elite race. So I wasn't that far down on, Pete Kennack and Geraint Thomas and all the rest of those Skyriders. So, I think it was more down to social media presence. And the thing with the national championship was and this is what I like, I follow a couple of people on YouTube that they don't live in the UK, they live in America, but and they're not in cycling either, which is interesting. They're still in the fitness industry, but they're more kind of physique competitors then. And I find it interesting how they pick a show or they pick an event that they're going to be at their leanest, at their best physical shape for, and then they count down to it. And they'll do daily videos, they'll do weekly, they'll show like as much as they can show, given the time that it takes to edit a video and get it out and everything else. And that's what I wanted to do with the British Hill Climb Champion. So I think the hype, for lack of a better word, that it built up into that day, it wasn't so much the days. It's quite funny in a way because there's some videos in there that actually, if you really watch them, there's the really interesting bits about the training and about the nutrition and the preparation, but they don't have a lot of views. But the video where I win the national championships has, 20,000 plus views. And of course, that's the way that YouTube works and the world works, and people will click on that video. But that's just the accumulation of what's happened over the last month that I've documented in the build up to it. So I think I like creating that story of, you just document it and you don't try to be fancy. It's just, you're just trying to hopefully give a blueprint maybe for, a 15 or 16-year-old who's just coming up and starting as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's the fact that it is obviously we mentioned you for mere mortals, for amazing numbers, but it's the fact that it's so interesting to see the process you go through, but it's also so relatable. You come across as being just yourself. You're not sort of, do you know what I'm trying to say? It's just very real, I think, which is why it's enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it's hard to describe it, but I don't. The reason why I started YouTube was to stop people from my local area from coming up to me and asking me when my next race was.
Is that why? Why you did it?
Well, it's one of the main reasons. Basically, I would go out on club rides, and one rider would come up to me and say, "Oh, so what race have you got this weekend?" And then I'd tell him, and then, somebody else would come up to me, later on in the ride and say, what race have you got this week? And I just end up kind of repeating myself. And, they don't know that I'm repeating myself, but, I was just starting to get, okay, there must be a way of so, you can do a blog, you can, do Facebook updates, you can do Twitter updates. But I know that, if you, not that you cover all bases, but at least with video, it's about as natural as it gets, especially if you leave most of the footage alone. And yeah, that's just how it started, really.
Brilliant. So you started YouTube for the, I think most cyclists who have family that don't cycle, just drives them nuts when you come back from a ride or they've heard you riding, they say, how far do you go? And you're like, it's not really the point, but it's that kind of thing, right? You just get fed up with the same questions the whole time, and that's how you started it. But that's very cool. And you started that a few years ago now. Just when JLT was folding, was that around about when you kicked it off?
Well, it was a little bit before. It was a little bit before then. I think I actually started the channel in 2015, but I didn't. I think, you can create a YouTube channel and watch other videos and comment. I think that's why a lot of people have a YouTube channel, or a YouTube account rather.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started, there's some golden ones back, like when I did the tour of Japan, tour of Korea, where we stayed in a love hotel, which is like,
I know.
It's tradition, I think, when you do that bike race, that you stay in one of those hotels. Because the race organization choose, where the team stay. You don't really get a choice. And when you tour in the length of the country, you could be staying anywhere. But thankfully, most of the places, even that hotel, it was a lovely hotel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's a couple of gems, like I was just outside the top 10 on the Mount Fuji stage of the Tour of Japan. That's on there somewhere.
That's a beautiful climb, right?
Yeah, it's a lovely climb. Yeah.
When I have to go back and find some of those, we'll put again some in the show notes, or if you want to go find them, I'm sure you can scroll back. So this year, the plan and the reality. So obviously you moved teams to Saint-Piran, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then talk us through the wider plan of what you wanted to do this year and why you made the team move and what the goal was really.
Yeah, so the goal really was to see if I could balance, I guess, road racing in the UK with this kind of alternative calendar that would be hill climbing. And I feel like hill climbing on its own is its own sport, I think. There's equipment, there's, special bikes, special equipment, even the training that goes into it, particularly now that, especially for myself, I'm not just limiting myself to, UK hill climbs or events, but also
It opens up so much, right?
Yeah. So,
and actually, I'm going to interject there because I may forget to ask you, and I know a few people would be pretty livid with me if I did. Given your attention to detail and your sort of fastidious preparation around your hill climbing, talk us through equipment. Where are you? Are you going sort of full in, cutting things off the bike, getting as light as possible? What's your current sort of strategy with preparing the bike for a hill climb?
My idea of a hill climbing bike is one that has to be functional. I think if I could ride a hill climb, just like the national championships where I won, I could have put the bottle cages back on that bike and I could have done, a 5-hour ride on it. And
yeah.
I think, hill climbing, it is a very pure part of, I guess, British cycling culture, but it is starting to, I think, make its way into, the world cycling culture, through people like Phil Guyman, through Lachlan Morton, who's just tried his hand at the Everesting Challenge. And they don't have to, they've been riding on, disc brake bikes. They've been very lightweight frames, but nothing's been really kind of hacked or bodged or anything like that. But for the British hill climb scene, I think you can still be competitive and not, cut the drops off your handlebars. I've done that, but the furthest I'll go really is to take the handlebar tape off and the bottle cages off.
Yeah.
But the starting point, I think as long as you get the starting point right, so a skeleton frame, if you can get a frame set that weighs, I guess, less than a kilo.
Yeah.
That's your bowl starting point. And then, the wheels then are the next place that you can really save a lot of weight. I was actually running a alloy set of wheels, hand built. I was actually supporting Chinlad Wheels, who are based in Gloucestershire, I think. And yeah, they weighed in at like 1.4 kilos. So they were around about 400 grams heavier than what, I guess what you'd call the favourites for that race were riding. I think my bike came in for that day at around 6.2, around about 6. So I was losing about maybe half a kilo, maybe a little bit more on some of the favourites in that race. But this year, particularly next year, because there's not so much left of this year, and it's all very patchy. So what I've been working on at the minute with Tifosi, my bike sponsor, we haven't gone all in for this year because there's not much left of it. But next year we are going to kind of see what we can push. And yeah, the first thing I'll be doing is looking for like a sub-kilo or a kilo wheel set. And then, once you get the frame and the wheels, then there's only kind of so light you can go on handlebars and stems and saddles. You can go carbon fiber, but, there is only so light you can go at the moment with those. So at the end of the day, then it starts to come down to how well have you prepared.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the main thing, right? It's the engine on top of the machine. So I interjected then. So sorry about that. So the plan for the year was to obviously continue with the UK scene, but also focus more on the hill climbing and internationally as well, right?
Yeah, and that's why I took a step away from the UCI Continental team that was Swift Carbon. The contract was kind of too strict, or not too strict, but for what I wanted to do, there wasn't enough kind of leniency there. So I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do this, then I wanted to be not so much left alone, but when, if I was going to go into road racing mode, then that would be me in road racing mode. I'd race for the team, no problem at all. But as soon as I go into hill climbing mode, like we cut that, that is a line that is drawn, and then, I then go and do that. And I wanted it so that because of what had happened after the Nationals, I realized, and I spoke to plenty of riders about this who have years more experience than I do, and also years more worth of regrets as well. And they said to me that the single biggest thing you can have is flexibility. And if you're in a position at the minute, they told me, where you have sponsors and brands coming to you to do things, and you can't turn them down. If they want to invest in you and you think it's a good thing and there's a good relationship there, you must go for that. Because if the team can't give you what you want, and this is getting quite deep now probably, but if the team can't give you what you want, then you don't have to stay there. You don't feel obligated to ride for this team if you have raced on this scene for the last 6 or 7 years. Don't feel like you have to be there for an 8th year or 9th year or 10th year.
Get stuck into it. It's a really interesting point, and I think I wanted to come on to get your views on cycling as a whole, but I think potentially the sport's at a bit of a crossroad. But that is an issue with regards to where particularly professional road race cycling is now. Even with Emma Pooley I had on last week, and she was saying that she got a lot of stick when she retired from road racing, and people were saying she was stepping down when she went and did triathlon and duathlon, but she made more money as a professional athlete doing that and stepping away from road racing and having that flexibility to pick and choose her racing. But with as an outsider like myself, I look at the sport and you read about the challenges that teams have with regards to just being financially sustainable, and then you think about the publicity that you mentioned Lachlan Morton, Phil Guyman, and some of the things yourself yourself are doing now, surely you'd think that, signing you onto a road racing team and then giving you the flexibility to make headlines at potentially like Taiwan KOM or other races is a great investment for sponsors, no?
Yeah, it is. It just depends because the only way I could do it was to actually end the contract early, which is what I've done this year. There was no way, even though there was like a mutual agreement at the start of this year that I could pursue, Taiwan KOM or whatever it was at the end of this year in the hill climb season. The world pandemic has kind of shot us in the foot, but that's changed all the plans, and hence why I've decided to pull out of elite road racing for the time being.
Yeah.
But I was actually watching the behind the scenes. It only came out a couple of days ago, but the behind the scenes video from Lachlan Morton doing the GB Duro. And if you read the comments on that YouTube video, there are like almost every comment is, "This is so inspiring," or "This is something that like I get more kick out of watching this than I do watching a 6-hour stage of the Tour de France." And it makes me think like, Rafa, EF, Cannondale, all these sponsors, like this is golden. Like this is exactly what, a rider is doing what he wants to do, and he's enjoying himself. He's got a smile on his face. He's riding, like, yes, he's obviously tired, but then that there is the crossover in comparison. So you or I could go and do it, and we'd be in the exact same position as Lachlan. Like Lachlan is on his knees hiking up a hill, and you don't see that in the Tour de France, and people have that connection.
But I think it's to your point. You said 7 years. Do you go and do it for another 8 years? I think there is this almost obsession of just doing the same thing again, or sort of a reluctance to change, or sort of constantly looking back at like historical things. That's the way we've done it in the past, and there are more ways to skin a cat. And you look at that, Lachlan Morton there, and then you read about Mitchelton Scott apparently got far better publicity not riding Paris-Nice and racing on Zwift than they did had they done the race. And there are so many different things with regards to social media and the diversification of the sport. And look at Matthew van der Poel and different racing that he's doing, and hopefully there are sort of seeds being planted for positive changes in terms of looking elsewhere and moving away from that cookie cutter model.
Yeah, and what's good about like what they're doing, maybe not so much Lachlan straight out, but particularly with Phil Guyman or even Lionel Sanders, with the triathlon, it's very much like Strava is a place where I think people can all fight for a similar goal, but the fight in talk that you hear from Phil Guyman and his tweets and the stuff on YouTube and Strava, there's lots of things that people can there's lots of like I say, fight in talk, but it's all for fun, really, for the most part. And there's lots of crossover because people have said to me like, oh, when you're going out to race against Phil Guyman, or like when you're gonna try and take a KOM off Lionel Sanders, or when you're gonna take Contado's Everesting record. And I'm like, I can't believe people are coming to me or looking to me to do these things. Where I'm not saying that I'm like the best hill climber in the UK or the best hill climber, in the world, because that was just me on that one day to be national hill climb champion. But, that's you don't see it from Froome or from, the World Tour riders as much. You do from some of them who have got, yes, you do hear from some of them who've got great social media following. But for the most part, a lot of them, they have somebody else doing it for them, or the team puts out, a quote from them. And it's just not, people are starting to follow athletes now. They're not starting to follow teams, I don't think. People are starting to support individuals.
Your athletes, well, I think with cycling, unless it changes and it moves into a situation where you have a team that doesn't change its name all the time, I think you're right. It is down to the athletes. But again, I think to your point about like, it doesn't have to be what you're doing and what Phil Guyman's doing, or professional road racing. Like, we can embrace all of it and make cycling a more commercial, appealing, and easier to follow sport. There's no reason we can't have you and Phil Guyman do a hill climb and also still be super excited about Strade Bianchi on Saturday. Like, there's a place for all of this. And if people sort of join the dots a little bit better and are a little bit more collaborative, I think there's lots of opportunities for people.
Oh, definitely. But it is going through that sticky situation at the minute where, I think the pandemic hasn't helped, but it has exposed certain things like, the Zwift racing and the what happens when there is no racing. Like, what does a team do? Where do the sponsors go? Like, some teams in the UK, or I know one team has had their bikes, or the riders have had their bikes recalled so that they can be sold to make sure that they keep the money. No. Whereas, what's the rider supposed to do then? Like, unless he has his own bike, which, he then has to pay for to ride. Well, does the team pay him? No. Well, then where's he? What? There's no, how can you expect a rider to pay for the bike if he's riding for a professional team, for example, and you're supposed to get paid? Right. Well, if he's not getting paid, how does he? So it's like it's a vicious circle of like.
And hang on, it's not like a long career, and it's not like a cushy 9 to 5, right? It's a 7-day-a-week job, and it's all consuming. And if you're not getting paid and getting short-term contracts, and it's a horrible situation. It's a hard world, but hopefully maybe some positives can come out. Maybe we'll have to go through some pain first, but hopefully some positives can come out of the COVID situation in terms of maybe restructuring things in a more sustainable manner.
Yeah, I'm confident. I'm confident this period of time will straighten things.
Good. I got all a bit deep there, didn't it? So, despite all the lockdown, you've still got some races hopefully coming up in the next couple of weeks, right? Tell us all about those.
Yeah, so on the 8th of August, I've got Tour de Stations, which I didn't actually hear about until the start of this year when I hooked up with Band of Climbers. Band of Climbers made my National Championship skin suit, which is black. We haven't gone for the white kit. We've gone for black instead. I think I've worn black kit for the last 8 years in my cycling career. So why change? But yeah, it's monumental. It's 230 kilometers. They've actually added in an extra climb for this race as well, and it's 8,500 meters of climbing, which is almost the equivalent of doing an Everesting.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be on the 8th of August, and then
where is that? From where to where? Where in the world?
That is about 20 kilometers south of Geneva.
Great.
Starts and finishes in Verbier, I think.
Nice. Lovely. So you've got that, and that's in a couple of weeks, and then what's next?
Well, when I come back from that, the rest of August will probably be spent prepping for the national, well, not for the national, but for what will be left of the hill climbing in the UK. So the first couple of hill climbs are in early August, but because they clash with this event I'm already doing, then I've already penciled in a couple for September and then October as well. And then, the majority of them are longer climbs. I missed out because I was doing the Tour of Britain last year. I missed out on doing kind of Great Dun Fell, the Struggle, these climbs that are quite famous in the north of England.
Yeah.
And then, like, all being well, I mean, it is still only, end of July. Hopefully things will be a little bit clearer in terms of travel to Asia, the Taiwan KRM Challenge, which
It's still on at the moment, isn't it? From what I understand, it's still scheduled to be on?
It is still on. They are accepting entries. The last I heard, I need to, if I'm going to go, but this is as of now, I would need to quarantine or self-isolate for 2 weeks and provide a negative test result 3 days prior to traveling there. So that's a little bit difficult to get.
Yeah, that sounds pretty hectic. That sounds pretty hectic.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a shame. That's an amazing part of the world, Taroko Gorge, and a beautiful event. So I'd love to see how you get on that one. And a good friend of mine we've had on the podcast before, David Lloyd, who runs a company called Velo Vietnam. They're looking at putting on a KOM in Vietnam as well. So if you're looking at doing more hill climbing races in the future, I'll certainly connect you with him.
Well, funny you say that. I became friends with him about a month ago on Facebook. So
there you go.
Yeah, but yeah, it's great to have a mutual contact there. I mean, like that part of the world is littered with massive climbs. But actually, I forgot the Marmot Alps is rescheduled for early September, first weekend of September. And
it's on.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's all dependent, but I was going to have a stab at the hill climb, which is 2 days prior to the Marmot. They usually have a hill climb time trial up Alpe d'Huez.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to have a go at Romain Bardet's time.
Wow. Okay. What is his time up there?
I've not looked properly. I don't think I want to.
No, that would be amazing. Yeah, I had a couple of people actually message me and say, "Have you done it?" or "What time do you reckon you could go up the Wes?"
Yeah, I think it's something like 35 minutes, around that sort of ballpark for Bardet.
Blimey, that's about 15 minutes, 20 minutes quicker than me.
Yeah, and that's at the end of a race probably.
I know, absolutely crazy. Very good. Look, I didn't realise I've lost track of the time. It's been such an enjoyable chat. But have I missed anything? Is there anything else that we haven't covered off yet?
I can't think of anything.
It's been a good chat. I've enjoyed it.
No, it's been really good, and it's nice to chat about these things because, well, other than to people in my close circle, to be honest, because it's very much a closed sport, I think, in some regards. And like, you know, some of the people you've had on already in the past, like they provide, you know, quite a good insight into the world of, like, particularly, you know, Emma Pooley's transfer from cycling to triathlon. Like you said, like you don't have to be, like, she was successful on the road as a very, very good road racer. So there's nothing, and time trialing obviously, and there's no stopping her from going across to another sport and try. Like, you shouldn't be pigeonholed, should you? It's not.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think it's just,
life's too short.
It is too short. I think it is too short. I think, but it's also, in defence of the teams, I think it's very difficult when you're trying to get sponsorship and the sponsors want various things, and things have been done the same way for so long, and everything's done, you know, quarter to quarter or month to month. It's a really tricky situation, which is why I hope maybe the current situation might help instigate some change.
Yeah, I think it will. Well, it's got to, because you'll just have more and more people looking at what, you know, Lachlan Morton does and what all these other people are doing, and, you know, they'll want to make the most of what they do as individual athletes, and that's not for, you know, sponsors can offer more, but then what do they get in return? You know, I think when you sponsor a team, it's very difficult. You know, you have to give, say, 10 riders 10 bikes, and you have to give them 10 helmets and, you know, 10 pairs of shoes and all this. But then, you know, you have to make sure that you get something back in return. And it's not just about race results. You know, it's not just about being in front of the camera on right? TV. There was actually at the Tour of Britain, I remember, you know, say if a team has 100,000 followers on Instagram, and you know, they failed to get in the break that day in the Tour de France. Well, instead of, you know, sitting on it and going, well, we need to get in the break tomorrow, why don't they do a spontaneous live stream from inside the bus, all the riders chatting after the race, and I bet they'd get more eyeballs on that than they would have if they got in the breakaway.
Of course they would, yeah. And this is what I think the sport needs to look at. You look at some of the American sports, how well they're marketed and how professional they are, and even football over here, right? I think that, you know, you need to how do you quantify the market value of an athlete in cycling? Yes, of course, it's results and performances, but actually, the way the world's going, it's far greater than that. It's what they can bring on social media, face to face. It's the whole package. You're basically becoming an individual brand, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I like it.
Very good. Well, let's all the best for the races. We will be following on YouTube, and anyone listening, please do check out Ed's channel. Give it a subscribe. It's highly interesting and brilliantly entertaining. And hopefully now you've heard him and I have a bit of a natter about stuff, it'll be more interesting to follow him on his adventures and journeys.
Yeah, thank you, pal. It's been my pleasure.
I've enjoyed it. Well, hopefully, come back next year and we'll love to catch up and see how things have been going since today's chat.
Definitely, would love to.
All the best, Ed. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast. And more importantly, don't forget to download the Unfound app and join cyclists from around the world on the Hub. We'll see you on there.